Hey, welcome back to Daisy Chain Creations, where I make things. First of all, happy holidays. Second of all, now we all know Kevin McAllister's a cool kid, right? But have you considered what really happened that fateful night at the McAllister household? The punishment this kid dealt out to two unsuspecting men really needs to be brought to light. Today, I'm recreating the crime scene and the tragic downfall of decorated war hero forgotten by the system who was forced into a life of crime, probably Marv Merchants. Now this is a one-part, two-part comes out tomorrow, probably. Part 2 details the untimely end of Italian-American immigrant Harry Lime, whose pursuit of the American dream ended in a fiery demise. Now I'm starting out with a fairly simple 6x6 inch canvas base. I'm going to top this with some balsa wood and then perform some light carpentry to make some floorboards out of pop sticks. Once this is all dried, everything is sealed with Mod Podge before a McAllister appropriate spray of dark brown to better resemble the floorboards. Now from here, the plan is to 3D model and print the staircase, some furniture, and our model in question. Let's go! Just so the scale of the modelling is consistent, I started by modelling a quick base measuring 6 inches or 152 Australian millimeters, so it's the same as the already made wooden base, before slapping down some floorboards just so it looks nicer on the build. Now our first piece is the infamous staircase. I started by making a single step, threw on an array modifier and offset so the rough backbone of the staircase can be made. With this all in place, I added on a plane, added on a buttload of loop cuts, removed the excess just to make the shape of the stairs before extruding this out. With the base shape of the stairs done, I threw in an elongated cube mesh, beveled this into a banister shape, and then the array modifier was able to follow the pattern of the stairs. After this, I was able to overlay another long cube to make up the hand railing, detailing the little curves as I went. With the stairs all done, I dragged over a previously made blockout model. I've done these a million times, so check out another one of my videos. Like this one. With our blocky form all together, we can start with some detailing. Now I'm mostly focusing on areas that will be exposed. Thank God we're set in the winter, so I don't need to add too much anatomical detail. Now that we've got a detailed enough model, we just need to make sure that everything is symmetrical and then we can blend in all of the seams. Looks pretty sweet, right? So for us to get the sweet look of a guy that took a 20-litre paint can to the face, I added an armature skeleton and posed him in an appropriately smushed out way. Fairly horrendous, I think. And now we're on to the fun part. For most of the clothes I do the classic, mask the original form with a mask brush, extract the mesh and add a little bit of depth to this. Then we can pull out the pant leg so it's a little bit baggy, adding in some extra hems for a little bit of authenticity. Now all the clothing I make in this video is kind of created the same way, so I'm going to be quiet on this one. No one, especially me, wants to hear me repeating myself over and over and over. But I made an undershirt, a cool 80s fingerless gloves, which on a side note is probably the most counterintuitive cold weather / crime doing article of clothing, because your fingerprints are the only thing exposed. I don't know. Anyway, I finished up Marv's drip with his classic cardigan and jacket, then added on some socks and shoes. In this version of reality, he didn't end up losing his shoes and socks to tar and tetanus-riddled nails. If you're liking what you're seeing so far, comment what else you might like to see in a future build, and please subscribe. Finally, we're onto our brave victim's face. Hot tip, always use a reference image. Here I shaped out the rough shape of his face. The reference image really helps with anatomical placements of eyes, nose, ears. In the end, most of these details will be covered up anyway. As for the teeth, I halved out a torus to make up the shape of the gums, and then added on a few cube meshes and sculpted into something resembling teeth. The detail wasn't a biggie on this one, as there's a paint can firmly embedded into his frontal cortex, which will be mostly obscuring it. But better to add the detail now, only to print it and not be happy with it later. Now for some of Marv's final touches, his facial hair, which I think sells the sculpt in the end anyway. Similar to how I do the clothing, mask off the shapes of his goatee, mustache and luscious head of hair, then we're able to extrude the shape and we can get some detailing with some of the hair and fur brushes available on Blender Kit. As for murder weapon, a bucket of Dulux, a fairly simple cylinder with some intruding and extruding, and I was able to add the details to the can. Now I ended up making two of these, one to be resting in Marv's skull and the other I'll use as a set piece. With Marv looking good and a fresh paint can, let's throw it into his face. To sell the effect a little bit more, I decided to carve out some of his skin on his face, just so it looks a little bit grisly. Now I apologise ahead of time, but the addition of eyeballs really made the whole thing horrendous to look at. And this finally finishes up our poor paint can victim. With Marv sufficiently detailed, the clothing all done, I used some of the free fabric brushes from Blender Kit to add some wrinkles and folds to the outfit. And now we're on to the last few things for this 3D sculpt, so we need some set pieces. First of all, I made a police tape with a large plane, subdivided a bunch, then joined some solidified text. I used the sculpting tools to give it more of an organic shape and the fabric brushes to add wrinkles to the plastic. Finally, I added a very simple end table and some chairs just to fit in with the rest of the hallway. With this all done, I laid out the pieces together just to see how this all looks to make sure the scale looks correct. Then it's off to the printer. Several hours later, the prints came out great and we do a little bit of post-processing with some light sanding before priming and painting. And now we finally get to the fun part. The staircase gets a healthy coating of a white surface primer. The steps are then painted a deep mahogany brown along with the staircase railing. As the stairway is drying, I flipped over some painter's tape so that the adhesive side is facing up. This makes it much easier to prime prints that have much smaller contact points. The furniture then gets a dark grey prime before a few coats of the dark brown that I painted the steps in. And with that brown coat all dried, I accented the chair cushions with a deep red maroon. Now to keep things lore accurate, I had some dollhouse carpet left over from my previous PDD sculpt. I measured a strip wide enough and airbrushed this with some nice festive red. Once this had dried, I tidied up the edges with some scissors and then superglued this down onto the staircase, stair by stair. A pop stick was great for keeping the pressure while gluing. Once it had been firmly stuck on, I touched up some of the folds where the carpet fibres were showing some of that grey underneath. Some of that spare carpet that I have worked great as a runner. With the set pieces all completed, we can get stuck into Marv. Marv was primed with a dark grey, and once dried I used an amber flesh paint to lay down a base layer for the skin tones. I made sure to paint in between the areas of skin on his facial hair as well as his exposed fingers. As the skin was drying, I started with the cardigan, which got a Cadian flesh tone. The jacket was then painted with a Tamiya brown. When I paint my models, I don't like to paint separate colours so close to each other, just in case I bugger something up that I just finished and I want to give myself a little bit of a buffer. With the cardigan fully dried, I added a touch of red to the Cadian flesh tone to add to the trim. Once this was drying, the police tape got a spray of bright yellow for a base. Once dried, I went over the lettering in a Sharpie and a black ballpoint pen. I found this gave the cleanest lines and I don't trust my hands that much when doing lines that detailed. With the exception of the print making the font look AI, I think it looked really good. Confident that the jacket's dry, I painted Marv's undershirt a pallid witch flesh white and the socks got a splash of corn red. Once the socks had dried, the shoes got a coat of burnt umber brown. Now onto our paint cans. Another prime of the dark grey was thrown down onto the very out of focus can, and then this was painted with the Tamiya metallic grey. The paint can stuck in Marv's face got the same treatment as well. With the paint can all done, Marv's hair, along with his goatee, got a reddish, muddy brown coat. After this, I finished off the collar on the jacket with some black. Once dried, I found that things were looking a little bit flat, so I diluted down some black wash and gave the model a fairly generous coating. The good thing about using oil-based washes on acrylic is that the wash can be really easily removed with white spirits, so that the black pigments will only settle into the creases, giving the impression of depth as well as some weathering. I found this particularly effective on the details in his clothing as well as the facial hair. With that first wash all done, to get rid of some of the excess, grab some Q-tips and dampen them with white spirits, paying more attention to the peaks of the creases, because these are going to be highlighted a little later on. Keep as much of the wash as possible in any of the recesses just to add that darkness. With Marv looking just grimy enough, we can start with some of that viscera and blood and guts. I think this has been one of the projects where I've been a bit more restrained with the blood, but I decided to just highlight where the paint can was making contact with the face. And now to finish off poor Marv, a quick highlight to bring back some of that colour. I painted some white on his cardigan buttons and the creases of his undershirt, as well as some brown for the wrinkles of his jacket. So it's at this point we can finally start putting the project together. The outside of the base got a coating in black, before all of the set pieces get glued in place. Lastly, to make the diorama look a little bit more like a crime scene, a heavy head trauma puddle of corn red underneath the model of Marv, and a small squirt of deck tan brown for the other paint can. To sell the effect of the puddle of blood, I used some clear UV resin painted on top. Now this does a great job of achieving that wet look. With the resin all cured, Marv gets stuck into place and we can call this a day. If you've made it this far, please like and subscribe. I've been a little lazy with my uploads the last few months. Next year's going to be a busy one. Take care of yourselves and see you on the next one.